Most Chinese people are acutely aware that for most of human history, China has been the most powerful country in the world. So they look at the last couple of hundred years as an anomaly, because China has been a poor and a weak country rather than one of the strongest countries in the world. And so they want to build China's comprehensive national power. They want to be in the Premier League. But at the same time, they're very cautious about how this is done. There's a perpetual fear within China that other countries will decide that China's a threat and will try and unite against it and balance China's rise and try and contain China. So therefore, for a long period of time, even talking about China's rise was practically a taboo. There was a sense that if Chinese didn't mention it, other people might not notice that it was happening. And that's why people talk a lot about the peaceful rise of China, and various attempts have been made to try and reassure the rest of the world that China is not going to be a threat, to give other countries a stake in China's rise, to show that it's a win-win situation. It's a favoured Chinese phrase, the idea of win-win, basically tried not to frighten the horses. So that's one very important characteristic of how they're dealing with it, and it's part of the fact that they're so self-aware about their power and how it grows. And that leads to a series of policies which are designed to reassure people. So on the one approach is to try and learn from other parts of the world that have not frightened countries around them. That's why Chinese are quite interested in the European Union and the idea of regional integration, because they can see that allowed Germany to return to the international to the international order without scaring people after World War II. So they're sort of experimenting with embracing regional integration within Asia, which has one benefit, which is reassuring their neighbours that China is not going to crush them and that they have a stake in China's rise, and a second benefit of excluding the United States from the development of a new political community. They're also trying regional integration to the West. They've created a thing called the Shanghai Cooperation Organization with Russia, which is allowing them to get involved in Central Asia in a way that with Russia's blessing, because it's through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Second way that they're thinking about reassuring the world is the Chinese have become completely obsessed with the idea of soft power, which is an American idea originally. And they're looking at ways of building Chinese soft power and of reassuring the world and making China more attractive. And that's partly by associating China with some ideas that are already attractive, like economic development, pointing to the success that China's had recently, political sovereignty, and also the idea of being independent from Western interference, from the interference of the outside world. And then, so that has led to policies like, for example, setting up Confucius institutes around the world to promote Chinese culture and the Chinese language, and much more sophisticated Chinese public diplomacy. I think Chinese are interested in copying some of the things that have worked well from the Indian economy. There is a degree of geostrategic competition in places like Burma, where China and India are both kind of active and trying to build it into their sphere of influence. And they're also quite keen to make sure that India doesn't become part of a balancing coalition with the United States and Japan. So a lot has been done by the Chinese to rebuild relations with India, because it's only 40 years, it's barely 40 years since China and India were at war with each other. So there was a degree of mistrust which had to be settled. But it is striking when you go to India how much more obsessed they are with China than the reverse. Chinese don't sit around obsessing about India in the way that Indians obsess about China. And I suppose that's because the Chinese economy has been growing a lot faster than the Indian economy, and China is a much more powerful country already. The EU and China have one of the most important economic relationships in the world. The European Union is China's most important trading partner. It is also a massive source of investment in China. And is because China and the US are so far from each other, and because Europeans don't have a military presence in the Pacific, it's a much less tense relationship than the relationship between the United States and China. Occasionally, the Chinese have visions of developing a multipolar world and think that the United States' preeminence in the world might be balanced by some kind of alliance between the European Union and China. They thought that might happen in 2003 after the split over the Iraq War. But then they rapidly realized that that wasn't going to happen, and that if China tried to split Europe from the US, it would simply end up uniting the transatlantic partners. So at the moment, the relationship is much more economic than anything else, and it has been pretty positive in for most of the last few years. But it is becoming tenser now because China, the European Union has now got a bigger trade deficit with China than the United States has, and a lot of the issues which cause tension between the US and China in the economic realm, like the currency issue, are now actually starting to become problematic in the EU-China relationship as well.